The gown arrived on a Thursday, and I stood behind my desk, staring at the delivery box like it had personally offended me. Thursdays were quiet at Dolan & Associates. Rafe spent mornings in the field. Site visits, contractor walkthroughs, the kind of work that left chalk dust on his dark jacket sleeves, and a particular sharpness in his eyes when he returned. By early afternoon, he'd be back at his desk on the 32nd floor, working through acquisition contracts and architectural renderings with the focused quiet that had unnerved me for exactly 4 years, 2 months, and, not that I was counting, 11 days. I was his creative director, interior design, client presentation, everything that turned a Dolan building from a structural shell into something people actually wanted to live and work inside. It was the best job I'd ever had, and I'd been careful, deliberately careful, to remember that it was just a job. The delivery label read, Halsey engagement gown, handle with care. I'd had it sent to the office because the package room at my apartment building had been broken into twice in the past month, and I wasn't gambling a $2,000 gown on the goodwill of my neighbors. The engagement party was 9 days away. Saturday, the 14th. The date sat somewhere behind my ribs like a stone I'd swallowed and hadn't fully digested. I was already carrying the box toward the storage room when Rafe's voice caught me in the hallway. Halsey. He was leaning against his office doorframe, jacket off, sleeves rolled to the elbows, reading glasses pushed up onto his forehead where he always forgot them. He glanced at the box, then at me. Engagement gown? Couldn't risk having it delivered to my building, I said. I'll take it home tonight. He was quiet for a moment, that particular quiet of his, the one that meant he was thinking through something he hadn't decided to say yet. The client suite on 31 has a 3-way mirror, he said finally. Better to find out now if Hism is wrong than on the morning of the 14th. I looked at him. He looked back, expression even. This was Rafe Dolan at rest, contained, giving nothing away until he chose to. I'd spent 4 years learning to read the difference between his silences, and this one I couldn't quite place. I'm sure it fits fine, I said. You haven't tried it on. He said it simply, not as a question. No, I admitted. Then go try it on. I'll hold your calls. He pushed off the doorframe and walked back to his desk as though the matter was settled. I stood in the hallway for another 30 seconds. Then I went down to 31. The client suite was where we held design presentations for high-end buyers. Warm lighting, neutral finishes, and a large 3-panel mirror I'd sourced personally from an importer in Florence. It had occurred to me, standing there, that I'd picked out this mirror. That felt absurd in a way I chose not to examine. I set the box on the presentation table and untied the ribbon with hands that were not entirely steady. The gown was ivory, floor-length, off-shoulder, with a fitted bodice and layers of chiffon that moved like water when I lifted it from the tissue. Cecile, the seamstress I'd found through a colleague, had worked from photographs and 2 sets of measurements, and still produced something that looked like it had been made specifically for my body. It was beautiful. There was no other word for it. I stood there looking at it in the box for longer than I should have. Then I stepped into it. The mirror showed me someone I almost didn't recognize. She looked like a bride. She looked like a woman on the threshold of something chosen, something wanted. I had been engaged to Hugh Alden for 6 months. He was 38, the son of Martin Alden, my father's business partner of 16 years in a commercial printing company that had collapsed under bad debt 2 years ago. My father's share of the liability had been catastrophic. $310,000, plus compounding interest, plus the kind of pressure that doesn't stay in the accounting column. It migrates into a person's posture, the way they sleep, the way they pick up the phone. Martin Alden had come to my father with an offer that made it all disappear. Hugh had recently divorced. Hugh needed a wife with professional credentials and social ease who would benefit his city council campaign. Martin had used the words merger and family in the same sentence, and my father had wept with relief. I had agreed because I didn't see another option. Hugh wasn't unkind. He was organized, measured, and treated me with a courteous distance I'd told myself was respect. Standing in front of the mirror in the ivory gown, I tried to feel hopeful. Instead, I felt the cool chiffon against my arms and thought about how I'd described the fabric to Cecile. Something light, I'd said. Something that doesn't feel like a weight. I had been in the suite for 22 minutes when the knock came. "Bryn," Rafe's voice through the door, low, measured. "Everything all right in there?" "Fine," my voice came out steadier than I felt. "The gown fits." "Good." A pause. "May I see it?" The question landed differently than it had any right to. 4 years of working together. 4 years of site visits and late deadlines and early morning coffee runs and passing documents back and forth in a space that had its own specific gravity. He had never once asked me anything personal. Not one question about Hugh, about my family, about any of it. "That's probably not." "I know," he said before I could finish. "I'm asking anyway." I looked at my reflection one more time, then I opened the door. Rafe stood in the hallway, with one hand braced lightly against the wall, as though he'd been prepared to wait as long as it took. When he saw me, something in his face shifted. It wasn't dramatic. He was not a man prone to dramatic reactions, but his jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, and the careful professional distance he kept with everyone seemed, for a moment, to dissolve entirely. He looked at me without speaking. "Cecil does incredible work," I said, because the silence was doing something to my chest. "She works out of a studio in Wicker Park. I found her through." "Don't marry him." 3 words, quiet without decoration. They hit the air between us like something physical. I stared at him. "What?" "Hugh Alden," his jaw worked. "Don't marry him." "Rafe." "I know I don't have standing to say that." He held my gaze. "I'm saying it anyway. Because you've been walking into this building for 4 years and doing extraordinary work, and this morning you were standing at your desk staring at that delivery box like it was a verdict someone had handed you." He paused. "You looked terrified." "It's an engagement party gown." "Bryn," my first name. He used my last name in the office always, and the shift felt seismic. "What's really going on?" My throat tightened. "My father owes $300,000. Martin Alden's offer was the only thing standing between that debt and consequences I can't fix. If I end this engagement, the debt comes back, and my father—" My voice cracked on the last word. I steadied it. "He doesn't have that money. He never will." Rafe was quiet. "So yes," I said, "I am marrying Hugh Alden, and the gown fits, which is one less thing to worry about." I moved to close the door between us. "I paid it off." I stopped. "Your father's debt." His voice was level. "All of it. $310,000, including the interest. It was cleared 6 months ago, through a private arrangement, 2 weeks before Martin Alden made his offer." The hallway felt airless. I turned around very slowly. "Say that again." "I have documentation. I can get it from my desk right now if you want." He didn't flinch. "I found out about the debt last spring. You were making errors you don't make. You were distracted in ways I'd never seen. I looked into it and found out what was happening with your family." A muscle moved in his jaw. "I handled it. I didn't tell you because you were already under enormous stress and because I—" He stopped, started again. "I thought it would feel like an invasion." "Which it was." "It was," I said. "Yes." Then Martin Alden's offer was built on nothing. Something was solidifying in my chest, cold and clarifying. There was no debt left to erase. Hugh was buying something that didn't exist anymore. Hugh Alden knows exactly what he was doing. There was a controlled anger in Rafe's expression I recognized from the rare occasions when someone tried to defraud him. He needed a wife with the right credentials. He needed her to be grateful enough to stay in the lane he'd draw for her. Your father's debt was just the lever. He paused. He would have found one regardless. The cold calculus of it, the patience of it, hit me like a breath of winter air. "I need a minute," I said. He nodded and stepped back from the door. I went to Hugh's office the following evening. I chose it deliberately. Neutral ground, professional setting, his staff nearby, the only way I'd get through it with any composure. His office was on Michigan Avenue, floor-to-ceiling windows, and a framed campaign poster already hanging in the corner. His assistant showed me in with the practiced warmth of someone who'd been instructed to treat me very well. Hugh rose when I came in, always impeccably dressed, always positioned correctly, like a man who'd studied how to appear trustworthy, rather than learning how to be it. "Bryn, I wasn't expecting you." "I'll keep this short. I stayed standing. I'm ending our engagement." The pleasantness on his face didn't vanish. It reorganized into something more careful. "And what's brought this on?" he said. "The debt my father owed was cleared 6 months ago," I said. "Before your father made the offer. You knew that when you proposed." He was quiet for a beat then. "That's a serious accusation." "It's accurate. It's also irrelevant," he said with remarkable calm. "The commitment your father entered into is documented. There are contractual agreements. We've made announcements. Our families have made plans. Breaking this engagement this close to the party constitutes a breach with legal penalties attached." He slid a folder across the desk toward me. $160,000. Non-refundable deposits, reputational compensation, and return of the ring. The ring alone is $45,000. I looked at the folder without touching it. "You built this so I couldn't leave," I said. "I built a structure that protects both parties." His voice was patient, as though explaining something obvious to someone slow. "I'm giving you time to reconsider. The party is 9 days away. If you change your mind before then, this all goes away and no one has to be embarrassed." He tilted his head slightly. "Think about what your father will face if you don't." I picked up the folder, tucked it under my arm, and left. Rafe was still in the office when I got back. Past 8 o'clock, the floor empty around him, light burning over the drafting table, the way it always did when he was working late. I set the folder on his desk without a word and sat down across from him. He read it in under 4 minutes. His expression didn't change, but I watched his hand still on the page at the penalty clause. $160, he said. Plus the ring. The ring goes back to him. He closed the folder. The rest. Don't, I said. He looked at me. I know what you're about to offer, and I can't. I kept my voice steady. If you clear my father's debt and then pay my exit cost from a bad engagement, I will have traded one arrangement for another and called it freedom. I won't do that, not even for you. Silence. The city lit up behind him through the windows. What do you want to do? He asked. Handle it myself. A bank loan, a payment plan, no strings to anyone, over time. I held his gaze. But first I need you to tell me the truth about why you paid my father's debt. Not the version where it's an HR decision, the real answer. He was quiet for long enough that I thought he might not give it to me. Then, because for 4 years I watched you carry everyone's weight without asking for anything back. Your client's panic, your father's fear, my deadlines, all of it. You show up early and stay late, and you make everything work, and you never once ask anyone to notice. He looked at me directly. Not the measured professional assessment, but something unguarded and deliberate. You were drowning last spring, and you were still clocking in on time. I had the means to stop one part of it, so I did. That's generous, I said. It's not the whole answer. No, he said, it's not. I waited. I've told myself for 4 years that keeping distance between us was the right thing, that you worked for me and I wasn't going to make that complicated. He looked down briefly, then back up, and maybe I was right. I genuinely don't know anymore. But you were about to marry a man who saw you as a line item in a political strategy, and I couldn't fix that. But I could fix the reason you thought you had no other choice. His voice roughened at the edges. I should have told you. I know that. I was afraid that if you knew, you'd leave. I kept the secret because I was selfish, and I told myself it was to protect you. The honesty of it caught me somewhere I hadn't been bracing for. I've loved you, I said, for approximately 3.5 of the 4 years I've worked for you. He was very still. I'm telling you that as your employee, I continued, so that in about 30 seconds, when I formally resign, you'll understand the sequence correctly. A long beat. You're resigning, he said. Effective this moment, so that what I just said comes from a peer, not a subordinate. I folded my hands on my knee. And then I'd like you to offer me the job back, with the 32% raise I know you've been sitting on for 2 years, because that omission has genuinely been insulting. Something moved across his face, then Rafe Dolan, who I had seen unmoved by contractors, clients, rival developers, and one particularly aggressive city inspector, laughed. Real, startled, warm. 32%, he said. I've known for 2 years. I was waiting for you to ask. You were waiting for me to ask? You'd have read a raise I just handed you as management. You needed to know it was earned. It was always earned. Yes, he said, it was. He stood up from behind the desk and came around it. Unhurried, deliberate, the way he moved through everything. He stopped close enough that I had to look up slightly to see his face. Bry, he said. It was the first time he'd used that version of my name. It landed behind my ribs like a key, turning in a lock I hadn't known was there. Don't make this sentimental, I said. I'm still furious at you. I know. 6 months of watching me plan an engagement party I didn't want. I know. And for being this difficult to stop caring about. That one's fair, he said. I'm sorry for all of it. He exhaled once, quiet. Dinner, Saturday. There's a place in River North I've been wanting to take you. You've been wanting to take me specifically? I made a reservation 3 weeks ago, he said. I was running out of reasons to wait. Hugh filed no suit. I learned later, through the kind of information that circulates in professional circles, that a law firm representing several of his campaign donors had placed a courtesy call, suggesting that a contested breach of promise proceeding against a professional woman in a visible industry would attract exactly the press attention his campaign could not afford. The folder came back unopened. The ring went back by courier. I took out a bank loan for $142,000. Deposits, penalties, the cost of dismantling something that should never have been built. I made the first payment on a Tuesday morning, which felt correct in a way I didn't try to articulate. My father called when the engagement ended, frightened at first, then angry. Then when I told him the truth in full, the debt, the timeline, what Hugh had actually purchased with Martin Alden's offer, he was silent for a very long time. I should have seen it, he said finally. Yes, I said, but we both missed it, and it's done now. He didn't push back. He'd spent enough months being afraid that he didn't have much pride left to defend. Rafe and I went to River North on Saturday. He was not, as it turned out, a relaxed dinner companion. He was exactly as focused and present and direct at a restaurant table as he was in a conference room, which should have felt like work, and instead felt like the best conversation I'd had in years. We stayed until they started stacking chairs around us. He walked me home. At my door, he said simply, again. We went again, and again after that. Saturday evenings became the axis around which I organized the rest of my week. He discovered that I mainlined iced coffee in every season and couldn't parallel park without narrating the process out loud. I discovered that his apartment looked nothing like his office. Warmer, more lived in, crowded with books he'd annotated in pencil margins. That he cooked badly and was indifferent to the fact that he had a sister in Portland he called without fail every Sunday morning. Small things, the kind that build into actually knowing someone. 4 months after that first dinner, on a Wednesday evening in my living room with takeout containers between us and a documentary neither of us was watching anymore, he set down his carton and said, I have something. He reached into his jacket and produced a small box. I looked at it, then at him. I bought this, he said, before the gown, about 2 weeks before. I'd run out of reasons to keep waiting, and I hadn't yet figured out what I was going to say, but I knew I was going to say something eventually. He held it out. And then you came in and told me about the engagement, and I thought I'd waited too long, so I put it back and kept it. Inside the box was a ring, a cushion-cut sapphire set in warm gold, flanked by 2 small diamonds, exactly the kind of thing I would have chosen if anyone had ever thought to ask me, which no one had. You've been carrying this for 6 months, I said. 4 months in the jacket, 2 in my desk when I started worrying about losing it, then back in the jacket once we started this. He watched me look at it. I wasn't ready to have the conversation, but I wanted to be ready when I was. I looked at the ring, at the man holding it, steady, certain, nothing performed in any of it. I love you, I said. I'd been bracing to say it for weeks, and when it came out it required no bracing at all. I know, he said, a beat. I love you too, Bry. I've I've been disciplined and idiotic about it for 3 years, but yes, he held the box out slightly. Marry me. No preamble, no speech, just that. Yes, I said. He slid the ring on, and it fit, which I suspected was not an accident, because nothing Rafe Dolan did was ever an accident. Later, when the takeout had been cleared and the documentary had given up on us entirely, he said, I want you to know the job offer stands regardless of all of this. You're the best creative director this firm has ever had. That's not sentiment. That's 4 years of performance data. 32% raise, I reminded him. Already processed, he said. When? The Monday after the gown, he said. Whatever happened between us, you'd earned it. I thought about the woman in the ivory gown standing in front of the Florence mirror, trying hard to feel hopeful about a life she hadn't chosen. I thought about 4 years of professional distance, and a Thursday afternoon that had quietly dismantled all of it. I'd walked into that client suite, trying to see myself as a bride, as someone standing at the beginning of something she'd wanted. What I'd found instead was a question I hadn't known I was asking, and an answer that arrived from a direction I hadn't expected. It worked, just not at all in the way I'd thought it would. If you enjoyed the story, hit that like button and share it with someone who needs it tonight. Subscribe to Ryan's Story Vault. There's a new story every single day, and I'll see you in the next one.